Caught slippin'. The front door of Underdog Tattoo Company chimed as Manny stepped inside. He stopped, scrunching his nose. Yo, what the fuck is that smell? Behind the counter, Dez, the shop owner, leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. Without looking up, he replied, Because your boy Ricky was too busy texting that girl who came by the other day. Forgot to clean up before he left. Dez smirked. Told him if I caught him slippin', he was going to pay for it. Manny grabbed an air freshener and sprayed wildly. Well, he needs to get on it, foo. Shit's nasty in here. Tattoo machines buzzed, needles pressing into skin. The scent of disinfectant barely masked the lingering funk. Hey, a client muttered mid-session, wrinkling his nose. Not to be weird, but does it kind of smell in here? Manny chuckled. Nah, man, that's just the smell of hard work. And maybe some neglect. The Underdog Tattoo sign flickered as Dez shut off the last lights. Inside, Manny, Gio, and Ray stood around the pool table with Dez, drinks in hand, shooting the shit. Yo, where's Ricky at? Ray asked. Dude seriously no-called, no-showed? Dez lined up his shot. Guess he didn't want to face the music. I told him to clean the shop. Gio sniffed. Man, it still smells. Dez grinned. Aight, let's make it interesting. Losers of best 3 out of 5 clean the shop. Manny scoffed. That's your shop, homie. Dez sank a ball. I told Ricky to do it. Ray shrugged. Fuck it, bet. The clink of billiard balls. Smug grins. Curses under their breath. Shot after shot. Dez sank the 8-ball, tossing his cue onto the table. And that's game, he announced. Good game, boys. Get to work. Ray and Gio groaned. Dez whistled his way out the door. Ray grabbed a mop while Gio trudged to the storage cabinet. He yawned as he pulled it open, then froze. The biohazard bin was slightly open, something dark inside. His eyes adjusted. A hand. A fucking hand. Discolored fingers curled stiffly. Gio's breath caught as he saw the shredded hoodie, the pale, glassy eyes of Ricky's severed head stuffed between bloody paper towels. He stumbled back, nearly knocking over a tray of ink bottles. Ray, he croaked. Bro, come here. Ray frowned. What? Just come here. Ray peered inside, then instantly recoiled. Oh, fuck! Oh, fuck! Gio fumbled for his phone, hands shaking as he dialed. Dez answered, casual. Yo. Gio's voice cracked. What the fuck, man? He's in the fucking bin. Pieces of him! What did you do? Silence. Then Dez inhaled deeply. I told him, he said, voice calm, almost amused. If I caught him slippin', he was going to pay for it. Gio clamped a hand over his mouth, stomach twisting. He looked at the mop. The bloodstains near the bin. Dez's voice came again. Now get to work. A long silence. Then, slowly, reluctantly, Ray reached for the mop. Fade to black. A distant sloshing sound. Part 2 Aftermath. The fluorescent lights of Underdog. Tattoo hummed above as Ray and Gio stood over Ricky's dismembered body. There was no time for second-guessing. We gotta get rid of this, Ray muttered, his voice tight with tension. Gio wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, his eyes wide. What the fuck do we do now? Ray didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed the trash bags and together, they wrapped Ricky's body. There was no debate. It had to be done. They couldn't afford to get caught. The night air was freezing when they made their way out the back. Ricky's remains in tow. They shoved the body into a dumpster, the lid clanging shut with a sense of finality. Gio took a shaky breath. Think we're good? This is gonna come back on us, right? Ray just shrugged. He didn't know. They couldn't afford to think about it. They had done what they had to do. A few hours later, they sat at a booth in an all-night diner. The world outside was silent, lit only by the dim glow of streetlights. Gio stirred his coffee absently, stealing glances at Ray, who had barely spoken since they left the shop. So what now? Gio asked, breaking the silence. Ray stared into his coffee cup, voice flat. I don't know. We just threw him in a dumpster, Gio. We killed him. Gio's gaze shifted away, the weight of the situation sinking in. Did we have a choice? What else were we gonna do? Call the cops and say we killed him over a dirty shop? Ray ran a hand through his hair, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think it would come to this. I thought he'd just clean the place up and that'd be it. Gio sighed, leaning back. We did what we had to do, but this isn't gonna end well. Someone's gonna ask questions eventually. Ray clenched his fists on the table. Des won't let it. He'll cover for us. A long silence settled in, the noise of the diner feeling distant, out of place. Gio couldn't shake the image of Ricky's lifeless body, his eyes wide and staring. I just keep thinking about Ricky's face, Gio muttered. Now he's gone. Ray gripped the edge of his cup, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. We can't think about that. We can't. A waitress came by, refilling their cups without a word. Gio watched her leave, then turned back to Ray. We're fucked, man. Ray didn't respond. He tossed a few bills onto the table, standing up. Let's go. We need to lay low. Gio followed him out into the cold night. The air was crisp, but it did nothing to shake the cold inside them. They walked back to the shop in silence, knowing tonight would haunt them. They would carry this with them for as long as they stayed in this business. And for as long as they stayed alive. Part 3. Des's Revenge. Weeks had passed since Ricky's death, and Ray and Gio were still haunted by the bloody night they'd covered up. They'd managed to keep things quiet until Des walked in one night, cold and composed as ever. Get in my office, Des commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Inside, Des didn't waste time. I've got a little offer for you, he said, pacing with a smirk. Gio shifted uncomfortably, and Ray crossed his arms. What do you want from us? Ray asked. Des stopped in front of them. I'm thinking about opening a bigger shop, better clientele. But I need insurance. I need someone to take the fall for Ricky's murder. Gio's stomach sank. What the hell are you talking about? Des leaned in, his voice dripping with control. You two get caught, go to prison, and I walk free. The shop stays clean, and you get a retirement plan. Win-win. Ray's fists clenched. You want us to take the fall? Des's gaze sharpened. You don't have a choice. Suddenly, the door opened, and 2 police officers stepped in. You're under arrest for the murder of Ricky Borden, one officer said. 2 months later. The trial had been swift. The evidence, blood-stained clothing, traces of Ricky's DNA, was damning. Ray and Gio sat in the defendant's seats, life crumbling around them. The jury quickly convicted them. As they were let out in cuffs, Ray's mind raced. How did they end up here? Back in their prison cells, the realization hit him like a punch. Des had planned it all along. From the moment Ricky messed up, Des had manipulated every decision, planting evidence and guiding them straight into a trap. Des had never been the fool, he was the puppet master. There were no traces of him on the evidence. He'd covered his tracks perfectly. The blood, the body, everything had pointed to Ray and Gio. They were pawns, and Des was always the one pulling the strings. Ray sat fuming. He'd been loyal to Des, thinking the guy had his back. But now, in the cold silence of his cell, the bitter truth was clear. Des had set them up from the start. They'd played right into his hands. Des was free, and Ray and Gio were left in prison, knowing they'd been used, betrayed, and left to rot while the man who destroyed their lives walked away unscathed. Fade out. Part 4. Justice Served. 20 years. Ray and Gio stood outside the prison gates, blinking against the sunlight, finally free after 2 decades for a crime they didn't commit. Their case had been reopened after new evidence came to light. Des, their former boss, had framed them for Ricky's murder. Now they were free at last. Ray turned to Gio, disbelief on his face. Can you believe it? Gio shook his head, speechless. No, I thought we'd die in there. Didn't think this day would ever come. The world outside felt different. They climbed into an old car, overwhelmed by their sudden freedom. After all these years, they had no idea where to start, but at least they were free. Flashback. Des's betrayal began with Ricky's failure to clean up the shop. What seemed like a small mistake exploded into something much worse. Des was angry. But it wasn't until later that Ray and Gio realized they were being set up. Des had carefully planted evidence, bloody clothes, fingerprints, DNA, all to make it seem like Ray and Gio were guilty of Ricky's murder. His manipulation was flawless, and they had no idea they were playing right into his hands. They were arrested, convicted, and sentenced. For 20 years, they lived with the weight of Des's betrayal. But new evidence emerged, and the truth came to light. Des had framed them. They were acquitted. Ray and Gio drove through the city, disoriented by how much had changed. But there was no mistaking the truth now. Des had ruined their lives. Now the law had caught up with him. Des's arrest, The arrest was swift. The new evidence, the blood, the body parts. The DNA led straight to Des. He couldn't escape. The lies had caught up with him. He was sentenced to death. The electric chair. Des stood in the execution chamber, a shell of the man he used to be. When the warden asked, "Do you have any final words?" Des's voice was steady, but his eyes were cold. "I told him to clean the fucking shop." The switch was pulled. Des's body jerked, and then there was silence. Des was dead. The aftermath. Ray and Gio sat in a small apartment watching the news. The man who had ruined their lives was gone. They were free. It had taken 20 years, but justice had been served. They could finally begin to heal. As they walked out into the streets, they realized the world had moved on without them. But they were out. They had survived, and now they could finally look forward to their lives. Des was gone, and they were free at last.